r/ask Reddit. Who is someone that was mocked at the moment, but then proven right years later? Joseph Lister first proposed that germs caused post-operative infections, and recommended that surgical instruments be sterilized between operations. People thought he was nuts. That's both fascinating and gross. Is the mouthwash Listerine named after him? Yes. Lindy Chamberlain, a dingo really did eat her baby, after all these years, I still feel bad for Lindy. And the hubby too. They really got badly treated, destroyed their marriage. Jon Snow in 1854 tried to tell everyone about cholera and how it was being caused by the water supply. No one believed him until he took illegal action and saved many lives. Turns out you do know something, Jon Snow. The North remembers. Enoch Semmelweis, first doctor to champion hand washing as a means to prevent spreading infection. Everyone made fun of him. Hey everyone, look at this idiot removing invisible things off his hands. What a nut. So said science. Then see what science had to say about Joseph Lister. Greg LeMond. In 2001 he said Lance Armstrong was probably doping. He was threatened, he took a huge image hit and his business opportunities suffered. He never let up on Lance despite the media campaigns, threats, damage to his reputation and business, and the recrimination of his peers in the cycling community, until surprise surprise in 2012 it came out that Lance Armstrong was doping. Who could have foreseen that? If only someone had told us. Oh wait, Greg LeMond did, a decade ago. To be fair, was always a good chance Lance was doping. The entire field was doping, so the chance of a clean athlete winning was pretty much zero. Didn't they work out that if you took the awards from everyone who was doping you'd have to go back to like 50th place to find the actual winner? Stella Liebeck, the lady who got burnt with McDonald's hot coffee. The media mocked her and accused her of a frivolous lawsuit, but it was an ongoing problem that McDonald's served dangerously hot coffees that had injured many others. The coffee was hot enough to cause third-degree burns to her pelvic region and she was hospitalized for 8 days while she had to get skin grafts and continued medical care for 2 years related to the burns. She originally just wanted her medical bills covered, but McDonald's tried giving her an insultingly low amount. So then she was forced to open a lawsuit. The courts rightfully sided with her and forced McDonald's to regulate the temperature on their hot beverages. Edit, to add severity of her burns and medical care. Edit. Many people have pointed out that McDonald's purposely made their coffees way too hot to save money by preventing refills and preventing having to make fresh coffee throughout the day, and that they stopped learned to serve coffee way hotter than other places. The coffee was so hot it fused her labia together, and people still try to argue that she was being frivolous or excuse McDonald's to this day. I can't imagine what it's like to be her grandson who all of a sudden hears his grandmother screaming in agony right next to him. I would definitely freeze out of shock. That kid that was crying about how they were treating Britney Spears. A few years too early for the Free Britney movement. Thankfully she's doing better now. I am genuinely happy that I haven't heard anything from her since the conservatorship ended. Means she's being normal, and that's the best thing she could be right now. The doctor in China who was arrested for trying to stop the spread of COVID from the start. They knew it was coronavirus by the 2nd of December 2019. They knew it was a cousin virus to SARS and MERS. They did everything in their power to keep it quiet till January. Edit. Wow, I thought 250 upvotes were a big deal. I am trying to reply to as many as possible, but there's just so many of you. I'm getting there. Also, I do understand looking back that we can seem to trace back the data rabbit hole to June-July 2019. Some even can go back to March 2019. I'm pointing out that I simply heard read the officially there's a new coronavirus in Wuhan and digital print on that date. That's when this all started for me personally. Hate to burst your bubble. It was known by end of September 2019. WHO knew at this time as well and kept it from the world until it was too late. John Ray, very skilled Arctic explorer who, unlike most of the rest of Europeans at the time, wasn't above learning from the Inuit. He was largely successful because of his willingness to learn from them and use their clothing and diet and techniques. Anyway, About 10 years after the Franklin expedition was lost, John Ray was out looking for clues what happened because the British Admiralty had a standing reward of £10,000 for anyone who had credible information about the expedition's fate. He found some physical remnants of the expedition and had met with Inuit who'd seen some of the last surviving members of the expedition. They related to him how they'd been taken by disease, lack of food, and how some of them finally succumbed to cannibalism. Ray took this information back to England, where society was absolutely outraged how he dared to spin such drivel. Surely no sophisticated gentleman of the hero's character that would be in Sir John Franklin's expedition would act so savagely. John Ray never got the award. Years later someone else did, who told of a story that was correct also to some degree, but less than Ray had been. In modern times bone fragments have been found with telltale cut marks, thereby proving John Ray and the Inuit right. I seem to recall the expedition was also found pretty much exactly where the Inuit had been saying it was for generations. Exactly. Courtney Love on Weinstein. First thought, she got shat on. There's a small bit in the book The Game. Highly recommend not reading it. The author makes fun of Courtney the whole way through because she's reading books on fraud and alleging that people have stolen her money. At the end, he adds in a sentence or two about how someone in their house looks at her finances and goes, "Bro, it's true." Alexander Fleming, the man who discovered penicillin, spent almost 10 years trying to convince the medical bodies of his time that it was worth investing time and resources to experiment with it, but was basically told to pound sand despite the respect he had prior to the discovery. Lot of good it did me. I was lucky enough to be born allergic. Happy for the rest of you at least. Penicillin patent. Fleming did not patent his invention, falsely believing that this would help get the invention into the hands of the sick who desperately needed it, because he did not have the means to bring it into production. The invention languished for many years unused while many people died. https://en.m. Wikipedia.org Wiki Talk. Alexander Fleming penicillin patent. Didn't the people who came up with insulin just rock up to a children's diabetes ward and just start administering doses, and by the time they finished the first patients were already coming good, or something? My classmate in nursing school, he made a big fuss about a coronavirus just noticed in China. He asked about if clinicals or classes would be changed because of it. We thought he was absolutely paranoid and insane. We laughed. I told my company in the 20th of January 20 we had to start planning. They told me I was crazy. By the end of March I was laying off 1/2 my employees and everyone was scrambling. Oh man. Remember on early 2020 I was telling family members to stock up and buy masks before the panic buying started and they laughed at me. March came and they were complaining about stores in our area being empty. People really ignored what was happening in China and then Italy until it was too late. Johnny Rotten banned from the BBC for ousting Gimme Savile as being a horrendous paedophile. Some 500 cases of abuse. Had his own set of keys to a psychiatric hospital where he would frequently abuse vulnerable children. Those keys also got him into the morgue where it is reported he would engage in sex acts with the dead. He was a demon in a human body. Had his own set of keys to a psychiatric hospital where he would frequently abuse vulnerable children. I'm sorry, what? Those keys also got him into the morgue where it is reported he would engage in sex acts with the dead. But he was a demon in a human body. What in the actual duck? Corey Feldman was ridiculed for talking about the abuse he suffered in Hollywood and it wasn't even a shock. It was obvious that kinda shit was going down. Poor guy. He went through some horrendous shit and saw his best friend die because of it. Child actors have it rough considering they're exploited one way or another. I am vaguely recalling an interview he did about this where he was asked if he had anyone to turn to at the time. He answered, Michael Jackson. I can't say I remember the exact exchange, but the gist was that Jackson was nothing but a good friend to him when he needed one. Alfred Wegener hypothesized plate tectonics in the 1920s, but this wasn't an accepted notion until the 50s. He was a meteorologist and copped a lot of flack from the geological community at the time. He proposed continental drift theory, not plate tectonics theory. Continental drift described landmass movements but not a mechanism for those movements. This is the one I was looking for. He was ridiculed and talked down on because of his plate tectonics theory, calling his ideas delirious ravings. The Alvarez Hypothesis, 2 guys who 30 years before anyone had indisputable proof of it hypotheses the dinosaurs died because of an asteroid. Well, they were ducking right on with that one. Added the word indisputable. They had proof in the form of higher levels of iridium in the rock layer from when the dinosaurs disappeared, and there was no guarantee that they'd ever find an impact crater. 20% of the Earth's surface from 65 M years ago has been sucked down into the mantle. 20% of the Earth's surface 65 M years ago has been sucked down into the mantle. This is cool as duck. Do you have a source or two where I could read more? Monica Lewinsky. That poor woman was dragged through the mud, and seeing everyone reassess what was done to her has been bittersweet. ETA. Bittersweet BC. More people seem to understand she was a victim. Sweet. But she was really young, and decades of her life were spent being a public punching bag. Bitter. Juanita Broaddrick accused Clinton of raping her in 1978. Leslie Milwee, 1, accused Clinton of sexually assaulting her in 1980. Paula Jones accused Clinton of exposing himself to her in 1991 as well as sexually harassing her. And Kathleen Willey accused Clinton of groping her without her consent in 1993. There's more. He was a serial rapist that was enabled by his wife, who openly called them sluts, and a political party that benefited from him. Sherry Rowland discovered the effect of CFCs on ozone depletion and received an immense level of blowback from industry. Not only that, but invited talks and collabs were rescinded within the scientific community. Poor guy was ostracized. 20 years later after his and Melina's discovery, he's finally recognized with a Nobel Prize. I overheard some talk in the halls of academia. Rowland was invited to give his talk. The science was solid, and no one questioned him during or after the talk, but the industrial chemist started talking such crap about the theory, without actually addressing the science after Rowland was gone. A lot of chemists did not want to rock the boat thinking it was political or endanger their grants. Courtney Love and Rose McGowan about Weinstein. Wait, what did Rose do? Rose was one of the first women to speak out publicly about the sexual assaults that Weinstein committed. Courtney Love in 2005 when she stated, if Harvey Weinstein invites you to a private party at the Four Seasons, don't go. Sinead O'Connor. This is the one I came looking for. A lot of people straight up owe her an apology. Let's start with Saturday Night Live. When I went on a tour of 30 Rock a few years ago, they told a fun anecdote about the only performers that have ever been barred from coming back, and Sinead O'Connor is one. And I just stood there gaping at them like, but she was right though. A couple people are saying they were right to ban her because she went wildly off script and did something controversial, which I guess I do agree with. But the tone of bringing it up on this tour was still super odd. They were aggressively avoiding acknowledging that her accusations were correct and or her actions were understandable. When I was in elementary school, we learned about the different areas of taste on the tongue: salty, bitter, sweet, and sour, in front of the class. I asked, then why do I taste the sweet all over my tongue when I eat candy? She dismissed my question and the other kids said I was dumb. Who's dumb now? As Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Dr. Bennet Amalu, who found that American football players had chronic traumatic encephalopathy brain concussions which were slowly affecting their neurological and psychological functions. He was strongly opposed at first but then proved right. His biographic movie is named Concussion. Well, personally, mocked for saying my brakes weren't acting right. Dad got frustrated. Took the car. I had to get another, which was reasonable since I was complaining about the one I was using. No issue there. A year later, he told me had to spend over $4,000 to fix the ATS braking system, and YTF I hadn't told him there was an issue with them. Woman face palming. Edit. Wow. Dads really don't like to be wrong. At least that's my takeaway from these responses. My most upvoted comment is about my dad's inability to believe me. It's sad that so people have been through similar things. I hope all the guys reading this will be better fathers in some small way because they remember this thread. Moms. It also won't hurt just in case. Gender might not be the factor here. I told my dad my car had a rattling. He ignored me for months. Then while replacing the brake line he noticed the shackle was broken. I think he said it meant the back of the car wasn't attached to the front. Old Ford Explorer. And incredibly dangerous. I wasn't allowed to drive it to the mechanic a mile away. I'd been driving it like that the whole time though. Johnny Rotten on Jimmy Savile taken from Wikipedia. Jimmy Savile abuse scandal. Edit. In a 1978 BBC Radio 1 interview, Layton alluded to the sexual abuses committed by Jimmy Savile and mainstream social forces' suppression of negative information about him. Decades before it became a public scandal, Layton stated, "I'd like to kill Jimmy Savile. I think he's a hypocrite. I bet he's into all kinds of seediness that we all know about, but are not allowed to talk about. I know some rumors," he added. "I bet none of this will be allowed out." 87. After the interviewer suggested libel might be an issue, Layton replied, "Nothing I've said is libel." 88. As Layton predicted, the comment was edited out by the BBC before broadcast. The complete interview was included as a bonus track on a re-release of Public Image, first issue in 2013, after Savile's death. 89. In October 2014, Layton said that why killed I meant locking him up and stopping him assaulting young children. I'm disgusted at the media pretending they weren't aware. 90. Layton claimed that the BBC blacklisted him following the interview and remained very bitter that the likes of Savile and the rest of them were allowed to continue. 91. Edited to add 2 paragraphs from Wikipedia referencing Johnny Rotten attempting to expose Jimmy Savile as a child abuser in 1978. Just before my time but also old enough that he was in the background when I was very young. How people didn't see it is beyond me. Built a hospital for kids with spinal injuries and was left alone with them when they couldn't get out of the bed. People knew and did say, but he was protected by the establishment. He probably used his contacts in show business to provide a lot of powerful pedos in the police and politics and newspapers with young kids, and they protected him in turn. Johnny Rotten wasn't possessed of secret information. He just had no filter, so he said what he knew. Loads of people knew, but they wouldn't call him out on it because it was risky and they knew nothing would happen. Richard Jewell, he's why we should all know to not listen to talking heads on TV. Can you elaborate for those not in the know? Barbara Mcclintock. She postulated the existence of transposons, certain types of genes, in DNA before anybody even knew what the actual structure of DNA is like. She was widely mocked by the scientific community at the time. Transposons were later confirmed to exist and she was awarded the Nobel. I'm happy she got the Nobel. Happy ending. Duff Roblin, the Premier of Manitoba. After the 1950 flood, Roblin's government initiated the Red River Floodway project. The floodway diverts part of the river around the city. At the time he was mocked and a lot of people thought it was a waste of money, because a flood like that will never happen again. It's been estimated that it's saved $40 billion CAD in flood damages since it was completed in 1968. I was there for the 97 flood. The floodway saved my home and my in-laws' home. Corey Feldman and Haim. Duck Barbara Walters. Wretched Old Beach. Galilea. Magnifico. I'm just a poor boy. Nobody loves me. Jack Layton early on in the Afghanistan war when the Taliban had been largely beaten and splintered into several small groups, many of them leaderless and wanting a way out. Jack suggested negotiating with these groups to end the war. The Conservative government of Canada labeled him Taliban Jack, and he was widely ridiculed. Had they negotiated back in 2005-2006 there would have been a lot less lives lost, and an opportunity to create a lasting change in Afghanistan. Politicians are shit, but I miss Jack. Carl Woodies and the discovery of the third domain of life Archaebacteriaps. N.M. Wikipedia. Org Wiki 3 domain system. Brendan Fraser. That sweet man. Mitt Romney was heavily mocked by many for calling Russia the U.S. is #1 geopolitical foe in a 2012 presidential debate. To be fair, it's China, but no one with money wants to say that. Word as Obama's advisors privately groaned when Obama snarkily replied, "The 1980s, they're now calling to ask for their foreign policy back." Madeleine Albright even apologized to Romney later. Karen Carpenter, the singer, everyone back when they were popular, myself included, mocked and sneered at how uncool the Carpenters were, but time told us she had one of the best singing voices ever. It's a timeless voice of incredible beauty. She was a fantastic drummer too. Johnny Depp when he tried to tell people about how Amber was abusing him. Marshal Ferdinand Folk when speaking of the Treaty of Versailles, this is not peace, it is an armistice for 20 years. Prescience personified. Edit. Some people are saying it's fauche, I've seen it spelled both ways at this point. Barry Marshall proved that stomach ulcers were a bacterial infection, and not stress, by ingesting, edit, with Helicobacter pylori and then curing himself with an antibiotic. Free Britney was a conspiracy theory for a long time, and anyone who believed it was a nut job, I'm glad that she's finally free from that nightmare. Edit. I'd forgotten to add theory after the word conspiracy. My favorite was Lance Bass, who told everyone that he spoke to her sister and confirmed everyone was happy, healthy and thriving, and he believes them over crazy fans. Around a week later it all started to come out about what was really happening. He got trolled so hard for supporting the conservatorship. Of course someone that gains financially from it is going to tell him things are peachy. Don't want that gravy train to stop. Henry Freeman, a lifeboatman in Whitby. He tried to get the other lifeboatmen to wear cork life jackets, but no one would but him. During a great storm, the lifeboat was launched several times to help struggling vessels and sailors. On their 6th launch, disaster struck and the lifeboat capsized. Only Henry survived thanks to his cork life jacket. They became compulsory for lifeboatmen shortly after noon. I maybe think about this too much, but the leave Britney alone guy. Sinead O'Connor. Cassandra. Courtney Love warning people about Harvey Weinstein. Janet Jackson, the whole Nipplegate thing made her out to be something she wasn't, whilst Timberlake faced no backlash. Richard Stallman warned us back in the 80s that if we allow corporations to rule the internet that nobody will have privacy or freedom on the web, among many other things. R/Stallman was right. The English physician, William Harvey, A.D. 1578 to 1657, discovered the circulation of blood. The current opinion in those days was that blood oscillates in the vessels of the body. For his views, Harvey was ridiculed and was called circulator. He lost most of his patients. However, before he died, Harvey's idea about circulation was generally accepted as a biological fact. So, my first thought was Copernicus, and my mind is just sort of sticking with that. Believe it or not, the first man to use an umbrella. Read about him here. I am also gonna say Sinead O'Connor. The whole scandal happened shortly before I was born, and somehow, growing up, I never heard what happened with her and the church and was raised to believe she was an attention-seeking nut job. And everyone I knew thought the same until finally years later, when suddenly the child sex abuse cases exploded in Ireland. It never even occurred to me to research why Sinead O'Connor was so hated and mocked. I have always been proud to be Irish, but those victims put the whole country to shame. Edit. Those victims' abusers put the country to shame. Megan Fox being shouted down and criticized for how she spoke about the way she was treated on the Transformers set. The guy who figured out washing hands led to less infections in patients got mocked and put in an asylum. Holland Breads. He spent his life's work proving that the Channel Scablands were formed by an absolutely biblical level flood. No one took him seriously because by that point geologists weren't really too keen on the biblical event type geology and were more in favor of gradual change hypothesis for how things came to be. As soon as satellite photography became a thing, his hypothesis was pretty quickly accepted because it's really obvious from above that it's massive flood tracts. Funny enough, even the famous explorers Lewis and Clark realized it was caused by floods and even wrote about it because they recognized the rippling hills and flood deposits like you'd see in a river just hundreds of times bigger. If you're interested, Google Missoula floods. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.